All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy holidays. Welcome to the CSINext. We're calling the procrastinators session. This is for all of the late shoppers here this holiday season that are wrapping up their learning units and HSW credits and need to get stuff in by the end of the year. We have put together a multi-program afternoon here at CSINext. We have got 4 different sessions from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern. You can attend each one separately, or you can attend them all. Hope to see everybody there. We've got a lot of people signed up today across the board. So just real quick on our chapter side, would like to thank our chapter sponsors, the Architectural Woodwork Institute, National Gypsum, Northern Facades, CAM Architectural Consultants, and Daniel Hargreaves. Again, your continued support and involvement with this chapter provides our members with a unique virtual experience, and without your support, none of this would be possible. So thank you for your continued involvement with the chapter. And I will turn it over to our first group of presenters here this afternoon. We have with us Lane Booker, Tom Hysell, and Pat O'Connor, and they are going to be presenting to us today on the AIA documents and evolving changes with those. So we'll turn that over to Lane and his colleagues here. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box. We will get to them as soon as we can. May answer some of them during the presentation, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So with that, gentlemen, the floor is yours. And Lane,
thank you, Mark. And I'd like to welcome everybody to this presentation. This is a session that was put on by Pat and Tom and Ron Guerin at the CSI National Conference in Minneapolis. Both Tom and Pat are from Minneapolis, so it made sense. We are all associated with the committee. I've been on the committee for 10 years and am rolling off as the vice chair. And then Tom, I'll let you introduce you and your involvement.
Thank you, Lane. Yeah, my name is Tom Hysell. I am an architect based in Minneapolis. As Lane said, I've been on the committee, I think now I've just finished my 7th year. My practice is heavily focused on airports, aviation, science and tech, and I like contracts. And then the guy who actually has written all the construction books and the volumes of text that attorneys use is Pat O'Connor. Introduce himself.
Thanks, Tom. As Tom mentioned, I'm Pat O'Connor. I've been outside counsel to the AIA Documents Committee since around 2007. That was the date of the last big launch of the A201 and other documents. And I've served in that capacity initially as second to Howard Goldberg. Those of you that know Howard know that he's a unique presence. Then when Howard decided that he was not going to take it any longer, he left me in charge, so to speak. I'm not really in charge of anybody, but I give advice, and sometimes it's actually listened to. And I've been practicing construction law for about 40 years, and as Tom alluded to, I made the mistake. I wasted my middle life writing a treatise, which is now somewhere around 14, 15 volumes. So I'll pass it back to Lane so that we can get the train started.
All right, let's start the train. All right, so thanks, Tom, for sharing your slides. And why don't you go to the next one? And this presentation is copyrighted. We will be providing it.
And the next one, not legal advice.
And the next one, yeah, go ahead. We have registered it for content, and hopefully when you registered, you put your AIA member number or ask for a certificate. Go ahead. Here are 3 of the 4 learning objectives that were on the description. Hopefully will help you understand the process that we use to develop the documents, and we're also going to talk specifically about the collaborative CM family of documents that were recently released. Go ahead. So this is the outline for today. We're going to talk about the committee structure, rationale for the collaborative CMC documents, how we engage industry partners, and these are on the next few slides. So let's get to the next one. So our structure, we consist of about 30 to 35 members, and we've been around for a long time. The first agreement between an owner and a contractor was developed in 1888. And so, over 130 years, we've been working on these documents. The committee has existed in some form or another. And so it really is a long process that is very process oriented. And we go through a 10-year cycle to revise the documents and try to understand changes in the industry. Now it's up to 240 agreements. Thank you, Tom. So the objectives of the committee and of the documents is to become the industry standard. We believe we are. We want to be fair and balanced. I've heard some owners in my world. I represent owners for the state of Ohio. I've heard some of my clients say that AIA contracts are slanted toward the architect as far as fairness is concerned. But we really try to look at it from all angles. One of the roles Pat has in counseling us is making sure we don't put too much of the risk on the owner or the contractor and allow the architect to take a little risk on as well. And then balancing those competing interests. Go ahead. So this is the process roadmap. So we incorporate any legal decisions that have come out in the past 10 years that the documents have been used. We ask for industry comments, sometimes through organizations, sometimes through individual contractors, architects, CMs, design builders, and owner groups as well. We investigate the impact of those legal decisions and what the documents changes might have on the community. We go through and revise the documents, and then we send them out to those liaisons, we call them, who might have volunteered to offer comments when we met with those industry groups. And then finally, we send it around to the committee for review. They comment as well. And then once they're comfortable that they're ready to go, we will have a vote in one of our plenary meetings and publish the documents. And it takes a little time for the platform folks to publish them. Go ahead. So the participants include some market research we do, industry stakeholders, including some of the lawyers, ABA Forum, ACCL, Construction and Engineering Industry Associations. We also leverage our connection to the AI knowledge communities. I was previously on the Public Architects Committee and got involved in being a liaison from the owner's perspective through that venue. We also have a number of liaisons that have offered to provide input. Some of them are lawyers that use our documents frequently or argue cases. And then we have the Contract Documents Committee itself. As I mentioned, these are architects from all over the country. We typically will bring on 3 members a year over a 10-year cycle. That comes out to 30. Some people might hang on for the next large revision, which is coming up in 2027. But they're all AI member volunteers. We also have outside legal counsel like Pat, industry advisors. We have 2 of the large professional liability insurance carriers coming to our committee meetings and offering comments. And it is a 10-year commitment. I am rolling off in about a week and a half after 10 years. And Tom mentioned he's in his 7th year, and then we revise the documents on that same 10-year cycle. So go ahead, Tom. The families. So this is going to look familiar to those of you who have studied for one of the CSI certifications. because the project delivery practice guides has these diagrams in a little different format, but go ahead, Tom. So the conventional family is, this is the design bid build. So you have an architect, he designs it, you have a bidding process or negotiation process, and then you build it. So we have the names of, or the numbers of the agreements in those connections between the owner and the architect and the owner and the contractor, B101 and 103, and short form B104. And then the owner contractor agreements, A101, 102, and 103, and a short A104. And then the contractor has an agreement with his subcontractor, architect with the consultant. And then we have performance and payment bonds where a surety is involved. Next. One of the documents or families of documents we're working on right now is the design build family. So this is where the architect and contractor are joined in some form of relationship as a design builder, and they contract with the owner. The owner may have a consultant to help him define the project and procure the party that's going to design and build it. And then once again, we have consultants and subcontractors, and those are the document numbers that bind those parties. Go ahead. So one of the methods of CM is CM advisor. And this is where the CM does not hold the contracts, but merely provides pre-construction services and advice to the owner during construction. And this was recently updated in 2019, and this might involve a general contractor holding all the subcontracts, or it might involve multiple prime contractors. But it's very similar to design bid build, the conventional family, with the addition of the CM. Go ahead. And then what we're going to be talking about a little bit here is CMC, also known as CM at risk, CMR, CMGC, goes by various different titles in various parts of the country. But in this case, the owner has an agreement with an architect, and in the conventional CMC family, it's B133 is the agreement. We're going to be talking about B135. The owner has an agreement with the CMC, which is either A133 or A134. In the conventional relationship, here we're going to be talking about A135. And all of them are bound by the A201 general conditions. Go ahead. So this is a diagram that shows you in A503, we have provided some edits to the A201 that allow it to work better with the cost of the work plus fee relationship that is in A133 and in A134, and can be also in A135. But on the left, that has a guaranteed maximum price, so the contract sum is capped at the top of that container. And if the CM's fee and cost of the work exceeds that guaranteed maximum price, then the CM would have to pay that excess cost of the work out of his own pocket, because his price, his guaranteed maximum price, is capped. A134 is not capped, and so that contract sum fluctuates up and down based on the cost of work plus the CM's fee, and could go up and up and up. And we use a control estimate to allow the owner to try to manage that. But those edits are available for A201, and I would highly recommend that you take a look at those and perhaps use them if you're using a cost of work arrangement. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Lane. As Lane talked about, we have over the past couple of years been developing the new A135 and the B135, and they're based on the A133, which is the CM at risk CMC documents that have been widely widely used, widely respected. When we did interviews with major contractors a few years ago, when we were doing the update to the A133, we were told, if you were to give us this document clean with no edits, we would sign it, period. I mean, and so that really gave us confidence that we were working with a solid document, and then we're moving forward in a way that, we can just enhance that. They did, however, say that if the owner started making edits within that contractor then would start the whole chain of editing back and forth and negotiations. But for what it's worth, it's a good document and a solid base to work on. So we're now working with these two new documents that are the A135 and the B135. It's a long title, but it's basically the CMC document for a collaborative project delivery. And the basis of the A135 is the cost of work plus fee with the GMP, as Lane just described. And the B135 is then between the owner and architect. These documents will be published in 2024. They've gone through all the cycle, as Lane mentioned in that one diagram of our process. And I will say that I've been on the committee now for a number of years. It's a rigorous process. It's one that I've enjoyed watching and getting the information back and forth from liaisons and from industry experts. So the rationale for this is that we, again, based it on those documents which were widely used. And we know that the project delivery has been changing. It's been evolving. We have been in a world where collaboration now is, as opposed to just being a buzzword, is in reality happening, and it's happening regularly and fairly intensely. The A133 is heavy on the construction period, a little less so than on the pre-con, and so we'll get more into detail on how we're doing that, but that is the focus of how can we make this more collaborative, more just enhanced in ways that we work together. Those of you probably are familiar with the IPDM, and when the IPDM integrated project delivery came out a number of years ago, there's some success stories, but it also ended up, it's a three-party agreement with the owner, contractor, and architect in one agreement. And it didn't get the wide use. There's a lot of things about incentives and whatnot that didn't necessarily make it the go-to document. So what we're trying to do is incorporate those principles without going as far as doing an IPD document.
Tom, got a quick question on that.
Sure.
If you can back up a slide to the collaboration and the full-blown IPD, is this I've heard it referenced as a lot of folks are getting into the IPD delivery method, but they're not going full-blown. Would this be a good starting point to look at that? I think some people kind of refer to it as kind of like, quote, IPD light. It's not the full-blown IPD delivery, but it's more than a little bit just regular design build.
Right. So I think that, and maybe Lane and Pat might want to weigh in on this as well. IPD in its full form, I guess, or is that it has it's signed by three parties. In this case, where we found that didn't get as much traction as we thought it might have. And so these are separate agreements: architect, owner, contractor. But Wayne or Pat, do you want to add to that a little bit?
I'll just note that, initially the AIA came out with three forms of IPD agreements. One of them was an IPD light, or at least was referred to as an IPD light, and it was built on the CM form. I was responsible for the one that was on the far extreme. It was, where we created a separate legal entity that, then incorporated all the major players that needed to be within what's called the bubble. That one became very complicated to negotiate, so it wasn't used all that often. And then there was the multi-party agreement that most people associate with IPD. But there's a variety of versions of IPD models out there. This is really in that vein of documents, this CM collaborative arrangement, but it doesn't tie the architect into the contractual arrangements.
Yeah, and Tom, that IPD Lite was known as the traditional or transitional IPD documents, trying to transition from CM into IPD.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So within the document, and these are now our excerpts from the document, is we're having, I don't think we had a purpose statement before, and the purpose statement is that we are all working together to agree to plan, design, and construct the project collaboratively and endeavor to align our interests with those of the project. In a way, it's a simple statement, but it's at the heart of what this is, and there's a intent behind this that we are expecting that people who use this will be embracing. We expect that we'll be able to evolve and operate effectively within the model, and again, to the benefit of the project. And then important and baked into all and most documents, mostly how we operate these days, is how are we collaborating with the BIM and digital collaboration tools. As we talked about earlier, the thing that's really important on development of our documents, and we see the trends, we see where things are going from our point of view, but then we have to bring in outsiders, and we're looking to major contractors, but also big and small ones, and to understand how their approach is, and then looking in, even mentioned the chief architect of the major government institution, sat down and went through discussions. How are these documents used? How can they work? How can we really build a collaborative platform for everybody? Owner's point of view, as Lane mentioned, Lane's been great on the committee because he represents an owner, and there's different perspectives that come in, and so, okay, this is how we see this. And then again, with the different attorneys and whatnot, we do send them out for comment. We get comments back. We go through review periods. It's been interesting for those looking inside the tent a little bit, is I know we've had sessions where we spend 2 hours talking about one sentence. So it takes a unique group of people who are interested in that. So there are a couple of things that are difference between the what we're now calling traditional A133, the conditional or traditional CMC document, and the new collaborative one. It includes the statement of purpose, which we just talked about, how to use BIM, more of a mandate than it was before. It was used to, you have to agree on protocols. Now it's like you use it, and how are you doing it? Management of the project, which Pat will get in a little more in detail. One of the main things in the differences is the intensity of pre-con services, of what is the contractor bringing to the table, what are the different aspects of that, and how are we reviewing documents together, and through that whole, all the pre-con, with a new pre-design phase, which is being fleshed out within the document. And then together with that, all three parties, the intent is that together we're identifying the goals. What will make it a good project? What are the risks, and how can we influence that and make it work to everyone's benefit? The major components on the project are dealing with a project management team, how the CM is working in pre-con. The document review was many interesting discussions and on this, and what is it that the CM can bring to the table to do the reviews, and then with page turns, page by page reviews, to make sure that we're all going through documents, we're all understanding, what's in here, what's not in here, what are we missing, and we do that in schematic design. Obviously, it's going to help our design development efforts, and then eventually help construction documents and indeed construction. Incentives is something we talked about. It's basically a fill point. IPD was all about, and I shouldn't say all about, but one aspect of it was all about incentives. How can everyone benefit within this? What can we do within that structure to enhance it for everybody, to really want them to be at the table? But now this is a fill point. We want to make sure that this worked for every size of project. It could work for large ones or small. So we're working hard not to dictate specifics on that, because it is going to be different for a $30 million project versus a $300 million project. Clearly, meet and confer. Pat will talk a bit more about that. Is how are we working on again with a collaborative way? How do you deal with disputes to make sure that it's not contentious out of the chute? And constructability was one where there was a lot of time spent on. I think, to me, the best benefit that a CMC CM at risk can bring to the table is how to build something that they see it differently than how the architect and the design team sees it. Constructability, however, as I think we all know, can be defined many different ways. And so it is incumbent upon this team to make decisions on what does that mean? What are we expecting? And how do you make that a contractual obligation? With that, Pat's going to start talking about the project management team.
Thanks, Tom. Let me step back a minute to kind of put this in perspective. One of the things that you look at when you're trying to draft a collaborative construction agreement, and the CM approach is probably the most conducive of the standard contractual families that we have. The design build, for example, is not all that collaborative because all the risk tends to reside in one entity, primarily one entity, which is the design builder. Design bid build has never been particularly collaborative. So the CM arrangement was always the most collaborative of the standard traditional approaches. And so the question that the AIA was faced with was, how do we take this model that is already set up for collaboration and really infuse the document, the contractual arrangements, infuse it with collaborative principles. And so one of those collaborative principles is governance. When you think about, how do parties work together? How do they communicate? How do they set goals? It oftentimes comes down to what's the governance structure of the overall undertaking, and how do the contract documents, structure that governance. And this is the project management team is the key to that governance approach. So, Tom, if we can go to the next slide, because that sets forth the kind of the specifics. So the project management team, unlike the traditional approach where primarily the CM is responsible for managing the construction going forward, and producing the final result, and largely just takes whatever design is given to it and then tries to price those. There's, with the CM approach, there's a fair amount of interplay prior to the construction phase. This is basically an attempt to supercharge that process. And so you have the team, which is the owner, construction manager, and architect, and they will draw upon the expertise of particular parties, like the mechanical trades, the electrical trades, when it's appropriate. But the core team is the owner, construction manager, and architect. From a structural standpoint, from when we draft these agreements, we have to make it quite clear that even though there's collaboration and we're bringing people together as part of a team, that there are clear lines, at least as clear as we can draw them, of responsibilities and potential liability that arises from those responsibilities. And that's what the next three sections do. They talk about what the project management team is responsible for, the day-to-day management. But then they talk about what the project management team is not responsible for, and who has the primary responsibility for things like managing the construction, for the safety on the project. And so this approach is to try to draft, as much as we can, a collaborative governance structure, but at the same time trying to make the lines of responsibility as clear as we can. So there's a tension always in that. Now, the project management team basically is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the project. They're the ones who are managing the construction, given, again, the lines of responsibility. At the end of the day, it's the CM who's actually responsible for much of the, of the management of the project. But the other team members do play a role. And the project management team is responsible for setting up the, the aspects of communication, building information modeling protocols. Again, primarily that's going to be the construction manager in consultation with the architect. The owner plays a more limited role, but again, everyone's at least at the table or should be at the table on a day-to-day type basis. And then again, it's, as we mentioned, it's day-to-day management. One of the reasons for that is, you want to minimize surprises. And if you minimize surprises, you likely minimize conflict. So, and then the owner architect and the CM designate an individual that has responsibility and authority, actually has authority to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. I think we can go to the next one. So here's the extent of responsibility. We have a provision that kind of addresses that, and it sets forth a standard of care, so to speak. The CM shall exercise reasonable care. It's similar to the standard of care that you'll see for design professionals. The difference is that we had to make clear that during the pre-con services, the CM is not guaranteeing its estimates and other, work that it's performing. But when it comes to giving a guaranteed maximum price, well, the name says it all. You're guaranteeing something when you provide a guaranteed maximum price. So that's why the language is bolded. So to the extent that there are guarantees set forth in the GMP amendment, which is the amendment that occurs somewhere along the design process, then that amendment likely does provide some guarantees. Obviously, a cost ceiling guarantee. Okay, Tom, we can go on to the next one. So Tom mentioned a little bit about constructability. What we learned when we were talking to people in the construction industry is, part of the process that we go through when we're drafting these agreements or revising existing agreements is we want to get a sense for what's happening out in the industry. Again, this group is comprised of architects who are deeply involved in the industry. So we already have a fairly strong background in that, but then we reach out to specific experts as well. And what we learned about constructability was a couple of things. One is it didn't have any clear meaning in the industry. Certain trades understood constructability differently than other trades. Like CMs, for example, didn't believe that constructability or, for example, design assist really involved design work. You get to the actual trades like mechanical trades, they thought that constructability as well as particularly design assist did involve actual design. And so, that was one of the issues that we were dealing with. The other was, what we found was that in many cases, the constructability review was performed by junior members of the CM firm. And as a result, the process was more of an afterthought. And so we wanted to try to see whether or not we could kind of, create a constructability approach that was more conducive and more embedded in whatever particular stage the construction was at. And then the page-by-page review is one of the few times where the AIA documents really drill down into, the procedures of how parties are actually working and operating in terms of management. Okay, so this we're talking about now, we're focusing on the B document, and the B document is the architect, agreement. So, there is the second bullet point is an interesting bullet point. The new provision in the B135, that's the agreement between the architect and the owner, requires the architect to coordinate the CDs with documentation from the design assist entities. In other words, the architect is not trying to transfer, and the CM is not expected to assume design responsibility or liability. That's all well and good. The question really becomes, this is a very challenging area to try to draft an agreement around, because in many cases, design assist entities are providing design services. If the mechanical contractor or subcontractor is actually providing designs, so what's the extent of the responsibility of the architect when it begins to coordinate that work, that documentation into the CDs. So that is a very challenging issue. In many cases, it may be a design delegation feature. And so, as much as that provision requires the coordination, there's a lot of underlying interesting legal issues that we attempt to try to draft around. Difficult to do at times. So CM at the pre-design phase, this is really early on in the construction project. The parties get together, they try to develop a project definition. Again, this is one of the principles of collaborative process. Whether it's IPD or an agreement like this, you want to get the parties to start discussing their overall expectations, their overall goals as early as you possibly can. So that's why you're starting to develop a project definition early on. And, that's why the construction manager and the owner and the architect shall review the owner's program and ascertain the requirements of the project and arrive at a mutual understanding of those requirements. Try to get that together as early as possible, as opposed to just drafting a design, handing it over the transom to the contractor, and then have the contractor try to ask you questions about what that design means. Try to get people to actually build it early on rather than, try to figure out what it means later on. So Tom, I think we can go to the next one. So this is BIM communications. One of the keys to a collaborative approach is to everyone speaking the same language. The old Tower of Babel. It's hard to build something if you're not communicating, and so you try to get an understanding and a shared understanding with respect to one's communications early on, including digital protocols. And so again, this is the page by page review. It talks about the schematic design documents, but that requirement proceeds through the various design phases. One of the other key areas of a collaborative approach is setting incentives. Now, Tom alluded to the fact that IPD models get very deep into the incentive approach. And that's largely because under an IPD approach, you don't have a guaranteed maximum price. You have, what we call risk pools, and then you have, very elaborative approaches to how parties participate in those risk pools. And, there may be some kind of limit of responsibility at, over and above, a certain floor, but in reality, there isn't a clear GMP for the most part. Here, there's a GMP. And so really the incentives are, what happens, what do you try to do when to incentivize within a setting where the contractor is taking on responsibility for cost over and above a certain level. And so many cases, what we do is focus on, can there be a sharing arrangement for cost savings below the GMP? That's, once you agree upon a GMP level, the room for creating financial incentives is fairly narrow. Okay. Then finally, dispute resolution. Well, this is when collaboration doesn't necessarily work to the extent that you'd like to see it work, but we still want to try to avoid just nuclear war in terms of the dispute resolution process. So first thing to do is incorporate a meet and confer before we actually start a more formalized process. And the meet and confer sets forth who's the responsible parties. In this case, the agreement is between the architect. The agreement is between the CM and the owner. They're obviously required parties. Either of them can request the participation of the architect. The architect this is not a multi-party agreement, so the architect is not bound to appear in a meet and confer, but it can be requested. Its participation can be requested. And if they can't meet, and the meet and confer is not at the PMT level, you want to get higher level to the extent that you can. You want the PMT to resolve most disputes, but then above that, there's a meet and confer. And then if that doesn't work, then you go to the more structured process of mediation and then arbitration or litigation if you can't resolve it.
So with that, we want to review pretty quickly a couple other document initiatives that were published the previous year that really informed what we were doing within the A135 and the B135. And oops, jumped ahead, sorry. So a few years ago, there was a publication that AIA collaborated with the AISC to bring clarity to a couple things: delegated design, design assist, and even informal involvement. And I, through my career, have seen especially design assist used in a couple of different ways. And so this is trying to get it to be really a solid definition that would be really helpful to the industry. Informal involvement is just that. There's no agreement, there's no compensation. It's just me calling up an elevator vendor and getting some information. And there's no guarantee on it, but I'm just helping me develop what I'm working on. Design assist gets a little bit more involved, and we've talked a lot about design assist, and this is where someone, an entity, a contractor, subcontractor can provide information to help through the design process. And there is now a new document that is called a C403, which will allow that entity to come to agreement either with the owner, with the architect, or the contractor, and come back and be able to provide this information. And be really careful, or we are careful with the document to make sure that who is assuming the engineer or architect of record, to make sure that the warranties and assurances of the documents, I shouldn't say warrantying the documents, are properly covered. So the document itself is a C403 published in 2021. And again, it says between the client and consultant, because the client may be the owner, it may be the architect. It's a document worth looking at to understand for how these entities can come in and help during the design process. Delegated design, we all know, I think, well, coming from the A201, where there actually is required to be engineered, signed, stamped drawings through the shop drawing process, if you will, curtain walls, sprinkler systems, stair fabrication potentially. There's a lot of different things that can be delegated design. Again, this document is working to make sure that we are on the same page and we have a common understanding. And as noted, it comes straight out of 312.10.1 of the AIA 201, which is talking about that certification and how that works, and how reliance can, the owner and the architect can rely upon the accuracy and certifications, et cetera, that are built within that. So within the A201, it's clear that they need to be designated. In my firm, we make sure that it's super clear, especially when we're working with the CM, to go through and say, okay, these are the elements that will be delegated in design. So often we have to explain that to the owner, what that means. And say, wait a second, I'm hiring an architect and you to be the designer, and say, well, sprinkler systems can't be. And every local entity requires that to be delegated, and so on. And again, just to reiterate that we shall be entitled to rely upon the adequacy and accuracy of those services. And this agreement is one that is between the contractor and that consultant. So this document, the C404, was developed so a contractor, GCCM, CM at risk, would now put a consultant under agreement. Oftentimes that's a subcontractor, as we know, where you could do steel fabrication detailing. Is that delegated design? If so, is that going to the steel fabricator, for example? So the other one piece to mention within that is there are changes going on within the design build family, and all of these things are feeding together within that of how we are approaching that. What are we doing within design build? There will be new documents issued relatively soon that are addressing progressive design build, and its various forms. So with that, Lane, you want to wrap up here, and then we can go to the Q&A.
Well, just want to throw out a few resources. on the AIA website, you can go to the contracts page, and there are a number of resources. There are a number of free webinars that you can take. And then we also have some email addresses where you can ask questions about the documents themselves or about the platform we use to publish them. So, take a look at these, jot them down. We have a YouTube channel where you can get some of those free webinars. And then with that, I'm going to, today we just received a new construction risk brief, which actually talked about collaboration in construction contracts. What a timely newsletter. And with that, I'm going to let Mark ask us, convey some of the questions from the audience.
All right. Well, thank you guys. That was some very, very good information. And Tom and Pat and Lane, thank you for presenting. Tom, I was not able to make your presentation at the conference due to a conflict at the same time, but I'm thankful for you guys coming and putting this on here, because I really, really wanted to see what this was all about. And there was some great information. We do have some a couple questions here. I'll just start with them in order. First off, will these slides be available after the presentation?
Sure.
Okay.
And you recorded, what are you doing with the recording?
I believe I'd have to check with our electronics chair, Mr. Hargreaves, but I believe our recordings go to the YouTube.
Hoping to post them on the CSINext website to make them available for review anytime. So
I believe that is the plan. Okay. And as far as getting those slides, Tom, would they just reach out direct to you via email?
Or I can email them to you. That'd probably be better if it goes through you. So,
and we could put that out. Okay. Next question is, where is the A135 and B135 located? It is not on the cloud access contract documents. Is it on the AIA web only?
It's not published yet. As Lane mentioned in the beginning, once we do our work, which we've done, we got approved or a few months ago, and then it goes through the whole process of whatever they do behind the scenes to make the document ready to go and whatnot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two things that happen. It's you get a legal review. They got the lawyers that are actually with the AIA that look it over and fly spec it. And then it goes through the digital folks, and I have no idea. That's a dark art as far as I'm concerned. And they figure out what they need to do in order to get it to a point where it can get delivered through the electronic means.
Okay. Got a really good question down here. See if I can read this correctly. If we have a design assist for CLT design, and we have the structural consultant as our architect's consultant, who are the parties to the design assist contract? This would be for a CMGC project.
So typically the CM would engage a design assist consultant during pre-design that would then collaborate with the architect's structural consultant. So that's typically the relationship that I would be used to seeing. But I think we designed the documents such that they could be engaged by even an owner or even an architecture firm to ask a subcontractor to provide design assist services. But the CM and design assist partner are usually the typical relationship that we see.
Okay.
And in this case, I think for the CLT design, it's an interesting question, because it could be that, when do you want to bring that entity in, and is that helping out the architects and structural engineer at that time? Do you want to go into an agreement? If you want to go into agreement within that, then I would look to that C403 document to say, okay, yeah, this is how we can structure it. It could be, Delane said, it could be that the CMGC would be bringing that entity along. In that way again, do you want to be under agreement? Sometimes people just assist, right? With the intent of getting the work in the end. So it was trying to formalize that. You know, none of this is actually, you know, kind of like years down the line, it's crystal clear, right? And so I think it's helpful to be able to look at what these things mean, how you want to bring it in, and where is their liability going to start and stop. I think that's kind of the bottom line is with that. There was another, I don't know if it goes out to everybody. There was I put a link in from the AICS for that white paper. So it should be, hopefully people see that within the where you could find that, you know, because it's super helpful. I thought it was really helpful to, you know, even though I've been involved a long time and all this stuff, is like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. That helps.
All right. Was all the questions we had in the chat box there. Just give it a couple seconds in case anybody has any other questions. And if not, we will start to wrap it up here for the first session. We've got 3 more to go. One starting here at 2 o'clock from Clark Dietrich that I will jump over to here in just a few minutes. So I think that's all we will have for today. Everybody, you'll be getting a survey link at the end of this. And I believe also you will be able to choose if you need a certificate for this session on that survey as well. And please check that off. If you don't, please reach out to us at info at CSINext.org. That's the chapter general email address. We'd be happy to help you with anything that we could regarding that. Again, you'll get a survey link. Just fill that out, and then that downloads into our Zoom database. And guys, I'll send you the contact list of the folks that need their certificates, and we'll take care of everything that way. And again, thank you guys, everybody on the call. Hope to see you at the 2 o'clock session. If not, be on the lookout for CSINext's January chapter meeting. And again, happy holidays, safe travels, happy new year to everybody. Thank you all.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone.